A woman is moving through a marketplace. The sun is already low. That particular shade of amber that turns dust into gold and makes even ordinary streets look like something worth remembering. She moves quickly. The crowd parts around her, not out of courtesy, out of habit, out of the way people move around someone they have decided not to see. She is carrying something under her cloak. A small jar. Alabaster. Smooth and cool against her palm. She has been carrying it for a long time, the way you carry a decision you have already made, but have not yet acted on. It is the most valuable thing she owns, which tells you something about how little she owns, and something else entirely about what she has decided to do with it. She knows where she is going. She has known since morning, maybe longer. She is going to walk into a room she was not invited to. She is going to approach a man in front of people who despise her. She is going to do something so irreversible, so public, so extravagant, that the room will go silent and every eye will turn toward her, and not one of those eyes will be kind. And she is going to do it anyway, one of these women. And there will be 4 of them, 4 jars, 4 moments across the span of Jesus' ministry. Did something so remarkable that he said the entire world would one day hear about it. 2,000 years later, he was right. But what nobody ever stops to ask is whether she knew what she was doing. Whether any of them did. Whether the act of breaking something beautiful open in front of everyone was calculated devotion, or something wilder than that. We are going to find out. 4 women, 4 alabaster jars, and a fragrance that, according to Jesus himself, the whole world would never stop smelling. The first woman walks into a Pharisee's house in Galilee, and nothing about this is simple. His name is Simon. He has invited Jesus to dinner, which is itself a complicated thing. Simon is a Pharisee, and if you do not understand what that means in 1st century Galilee, the historian Josephus can help you. In his Antiquities, Josephus describes the Pharisees as the most influential religious sect in Jewish society, men of enormous social weight whose approval shaped public opinion the way gravity shapes water. An invitation to Simon's table is not a casual meal. It is a statement. It means something. Jesus accepted it. He accepted most invitations. That, too, meant something. The dinner is formal. The guests recline on low couches arranged in a U-shape around the table. Feet extended outward, away from the food, toward the walls. In 1st century Jewish custom, a rabbi's dinner was not entirely private. The poor were permitted to stand at the edges of the room and listen. The door was open. That open door is important. Remember it. Simon watches Jesus carefully from across the table. He is not hostile, not exactly. He is evaluating. There is a difference, though sometimes it is very small. Simon is a man who has spent his life organizing the world into clean categories, and Jesus keeps refusing to stay in any of them. When a careful man encounters something he cannot categorize, he watches more closely. He files things away. He waits. Here's what most people miss about this scene. Simon is not a villain in this story. He is not standing in the corner of his own dining room, plotting against righteousness. He is a careful man. A disciplined man. A man who has built his entire life on the understanding that holiness is achievable if you are rigorous enough, consistent enough, serious enough about the law. He has been serious about the law his entire life. It has cost him things. He does not talk about what it has cost him. He calls it faithfulness. He has invited Jesus because part of him, buried under the evaluation and the careful watching, is curious. Maybe more than curious. He does not yet know that the woman with the jar is already on her way. She comes through the open door. Nobody stops her. Not because they welcome her, but because the shock of seeing her here, in this house, at this table, makes everyone momentarily forget that they could. She is known in this town the way certain people are known. completely, thoroughly, by one thing only. The Greek word the Gospel uses for her is Hamartolos, sinner. But that translation is too gentle. Hamartolos in first century usage did not mean someone who occasionally fell short. It meant someone whose entire public identity had collapsed into a single category. She did not have a reputation. She was a reputation. Every person in Simon's dining room knows exactly who she is and exactly what she has done. The word walks in with her. She does not go to his face. She goes to his feet. This matters. In that culture, in that room, approaching someone's face meant claiming a right to address them. She is not claiming any rights. She is not making an argument. She is not asking for a debate or a verdict or even a conversation. She goes to the lowest place available, the feet of a reclining man. And she stays there. And then she begins to weep. The tears fall before she has even opened the jar. They fall on his feet, this man's dusty, road-worn feet. And she has nothing to wipe them with. No towel, no cloth. She had not planned for tears, or maybe she had planned for nothing except showing up, which is sometimes the whole plan. She reaches up and loosens her hair. In first century Jewish culture, a woman's unbound hair in public was an act of profound vulnerability. It was a kind of intimacy reserved for a husband, for a bedroom, for the most private of spaces. She is doing it here, in Simon's dining room, in front of everyone. She is coming undone in public, and she does not stop. She kisses his feet. She anoints them with the perfume, and then she breaks the jar. The historian Pliny the Elder, writing in his natural history just decades after this evening, explains that alabaster vessels were sealed at the neck in a way that left only one option for opening them. You did not uncork an alabaster jar. You snapped the neck. One clean break, and everything inside was released. And the jar itself became irreparable, useless, finished. There was no putting it back together, no saving the rest for later, no second thoughts once the neck was gone. She knew this when she walked through the door. She knew this before she left her house. The breaking was not an accident. The perfume fills the room. Every person at Simon's table smells it at the same moment. Something irreversible has just happened, and the evidence of it is in the air, and nobody can pretend otherwise. Simon watches all of this and says nothing out loud, but Luke tells us exactly what he is thinking. If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is. The Greek word Simon uses internally is tis, not just who, but what kind. Simon does not see a woman at Jesus' feet. He sees a category, a classification, a type of person that has no business being in contact with a teacher of righteousness. In Simon's organized world, her presence here is not a tragedy. It is a contamination. And this is where it gets remarkable. Jesus does not look at the woman. He looks at Simon. He says, "Simon, I have something to tell you." And Simon, perhaps relieved that Jesus is finally addressing the obvious problem in the room, says, "Tell me, teacher." Jesus tells him a story. 2 men owed debts to a moneylender. One owed 500 denarii, the other owed 50. The moneylender cancelled both debts. Which one, Jesus asks, will love him more? Simon answers slowly, carefully, like a man walking across ice. The one, I suppose, who had the bigger debt cancelled. Jesus says, "You have judged correctly." Then he turns. And here is a moment worth sitting inside. He turns to look at the woman. But he speaks to Simon. "Do you see this woman? Not. Do you see this sinner? Not. Do you see this problem? Do you see this woman?" Simon has been looking at her for the last several minutes without seeing her at all. Jesus names everything Simon did not do. No water for his feet, no kiss of greeting, no oil for his head. And then names everything she did: tears, hair, kisses. Perfume. He catalogues her acts of devotion with the attention of someone who has been watching very carefully and intends to make sure the record is accurate. Then he speaks to her directly. Your sins are forgiven. The Greek word is Aphiemi. It does not simply mean pardoned, the way a judge pardons a criminal while still noting the crime in the ledger. Aphiemi means released, untied. The way you release a prisoner from chains, or a ship from a dock, or a debt from a record that can no longer be found. She came into this room tied to one word, Hamartolos, and she is leaving untied from it entirely. The guests at Simon's table begin murmuring among themselves. Who is this who even forgives sins? They are asking the right question. They just cannot bear the answer yet. Jesus looks at her one more time. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. She came in with a jar and a word that owned her. She leaves with neither. The jar is broken on the floor. The word is gone. And the fragrance. The fragrance is still in the air, long after she has walked back out through the open door. Stay with me, because she is not the last woman to walk into a room with a jar she intends to break. The next one will travel to a different town, to a different Simon, to a different table. And what she pours will cost something closer to everything. The second woman has no name. Not in Mark. Not in Matthew. Not in any manuscript, any commentary, any church tradition that has survived 2,000 years of people trying to preserve everything worth preserving about this story. She walked into a room. She did something Jesus called beautiful. He promised the whole world would remember her. And then nobody wrote down her name. We are going to spend time with her anyway. Because what she did, and when she did it, and what it cost her, these things matter enormously once you understand the calendar. It is Passion Week. The last week, Josephus, writing in his Jewish War, places Bethany on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, approximately 1.7 miles from the walls of Jerusalem. 1.7 miles. On a clear day, you could stand in Bethany and see the temple gleaming in the sun. That vast white and gold structure Herod had spent decades rebuilding into one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. Beautiful. Enormous. And in 5 days, the man sitting at this table will tell his disciples that not one stone of it will be left on another. But that is 5 days away. Tonight there is a dinner. The host is Simon. Another Simon. But this one is different from the Pharisee in Galilee. This Simon is called Simon the Leper. In first century Judea, that name means he was once excluded from everything. From the temple, from the synagogue, from his own family's table. Leprosy did not just damage the body. It severed every social and religious connection a person had. Simon the Leper was once a man who stood outside looking in at a world that had decided he no longer belonged to it. He kept the name after his healing. Some people do that. They keep the name of the wound because the healing is the more important part of the story, and they do not want anyone to forget where they started. Jesus is reclining at his table. The same posture, the same open room, the same amber-lit evening. But everything else is different now. The ministry that began in Galilee with crowds pressing in from every hillside has narrowed to this. Jerusalem in 5 days. The chief priests already meeting in secret. Judas already calculating. The disciples arguing about greatness while the shadow of a cross falls longer every hour. Pay attention to this. The men in this room have followed Jesus for 3 years. They have watched him heal the sick, raise the dead, walk on water, feed thousands with almost nothing. They have heard him speak about his death. Plainly, directly, more than once. And every time he has said it, they have found a way to not quite hear it. Peter once rebuked him for saying it. The mind does not easily accept what the heart cannot bear. The woman comes in. We do not know how she got there. We do not know if she was invited or if she simply arrived, the way the woman in Galilee simply arrived. We do not know if she had been planning this for days, or if something moved in her that evening and she picked up the jar and walked. What we know is what she carried. An alabaster jar of pure nard. Mark is precise about this in a way that feels almost legal. Nardou pistikes, genuine nard, trustworthy nard. The Greek pistikes shares its root with pistis, the word for faith, the perfume of faithfulness, and it had travelled a long way to get here. Pliny the Elder tells us that nard, Spikenard, was imported from the foothills of the Himalayas, from the border region of what we now call Nepal and northern India, 3,000 miles by caravan across some of the most difficult terrain on earth, passing through Persian markets, loaded onto Mediterranean trading ships, arriving finally in Judean shops where it was sold in sealed alabaster jars at prices that made ordinary people stop and stare and keep walking. 300 denarii. A laborer in 1st century Judea earned 1 denarius for a full day's work. 300 denarii was not a luxury purchase. It was not an extravagance. It was a year's wages. It was rent and food and clothing and every practical thing a person needed to survive for 12 months, compressed into one small jar that she is now holding in both hands at the edge of Simon's dining room. She breaks it. Not carefully. Not partially. She breaks the neck of the jar. That single irreversible snap, and she pours every drop over his head. The nard runs down through his hair, across his face, soaking into his robe, pooling on the couch beneath him. She does not measure. She does not calculate a reasonable amount and save the rest for later. There is no rest. There is only the pouring, and then the empty jar, and then the fragrance. That fragrance that the disciples will smell on their own clothes for days afterward, without being able to name exactly why it makes them feel something close to grief. The room erupts. Mark says the disciples were aganakteo, a Greek word that does not mean mildly annoyed or quietly concerned. It means furious, deeply, personally offended. Matthew confirms they rebuked her, the same word used elsewhere for rebuking storms. They are not offering gentle redirection. They are telling her she has done something wrong. But it gets stranger. Their argument is not cruel. It is logical. It is even compassionate in its own way. This perfume could have been sold. The money could have fed hundreds of families. The poor are always with you, yes. But 300 denarii buys a great deal of bread. And there are people in Jerusalem tonight who will go to sleep hungry, and this woman just poured a year's worth of bread on one man's head. They are not wrong about the math. They are catastrophically wrong about the moment. Jesus says 2 words, "Leave her alone." Not, she means well. Not, I understand your concern about responsible stewardship. Not, perhaps we can discuss the relative merits of various forms of generosity at a more convenient time. 2 words. The same authority that stilled a storm on the Sea of Galilee. The same voice that called Lazarus out of a sealed tomb 4 days dead. Turns it on his own disciples and says, "Leave her alone." The room goes quiet. Then he says something that should stop every one of us cold 2,000 years later. Still sitting with our own calculations about what is reasonable and what is excessive and what the most responsible use of our resources might be, he says, "She has done a beautiful thing to me." The Greek word is kalos. Beautiful, noble, morally excellent. The kind of word used not just for things that are pleasant to look at, but for things that are right in a way that goes deeper than logic. He does not say practical. He does not say efficient. He does not say admirable given the circumstances. He says beautiful. He looks at a woman who just poured a year's wages over his head while his disciples shouted at her, and the word he reaches for is the word you reach for when you see something that makes your chest ache, because it is so entirely, completely what it should be. Here's the part nobody tells you. Jesus then says something so specific and so confident that it should have made everyone in that room set down their bread and pay very close attention. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, in memory of her. He is sitting in a borrowed dining room in a village of fewer than 1,000 people in an occupied territory on the eastern edge of the Roman Empire 5 days before his arrest, and he is making a promise about the whole world. He is saying that this moment, this woman, this broken jar, will outlast Rome, will outlast the temple, which will be rubble in 40 years, will outlast every emperor and conquest and century between that evening and this one. He was right. You are the proof of it. She has no name in any text. But you are hearing her story right now, which means Jesus kept his word. The way he always keeps his word, with a precision that is almost unreasonable, with a faithfulness that does not expire. Now hold that thought, because the disciples heard that promise and still did not fully understand it. They would not understand most of what happened that week until after it was over. Until the morning 3 days after the cross, when understanding arrived all at once like light through a broken tomb. But there is one person in the story of the anointing who may have understood before any of them. One person who did not need the resurrection to explain what the teacher had been saying about his death. Her name is Mary. She lives in Bethany. She has 2 siblings. Martha, who manages the household the way a general manages a campaign, and Lazarus, who was dead 4 days and is now very much alive, and sitting at the dinner table like a man with something extraordinary to think about during meals. Every time the Gospel of John shows us Mary of Bethany, she is in the same position, at Jesus' feet. In Luke chapter 10, when Martha is frustrated that her sister is not helping in the kitchen, Mary is sitting at his feet, listening. In John chapter 11, when Jesus arrives after Lazarus has died, and Martha goes out to meet him with questions and theology, Mary stays inside. And when she finally comes out, she falls at his feet, weeping. This is not a coincidence. This is a portrait. John is showing you who Mary is through the one detail he keeps returning to. Mary of Bethany is a woman who has learned that the best place to be is at his feet, that everything worth knowing comes from staying close to him and listening. And here is what that listening produced. It is now 6 days before Passover, John chapter 12, verse 1. The most precisely dated scene in any of the 4 anointing accounts. 6 days. John wants you to count. 6 days before the Passover that will end with a cross and a sealed tomb and a city that cannot make sense of what it has just done. Martha is serving, because Martha is always serving, her love expressed in motion, and the particular dignity of a woman who shows up and does what needs to be done. Lazarus is reclining at the table, a man who has been to the other side of death and come back, eating dinner with the man who called him home, which is perhaps the most quietly remarkable image in all of Scripture. And Mary is there. She has something in her hands. She is holding a pound of pure nard. John is precise about this, the way a man is precise when he was there and he never forgot it. Nardou pistikes politemu. Nard, genuine, very costly. 3 adjectives stacked deliberately, the way you stack sandbags against something you want to make sure does not wash away. John uses the exact same phrase Mark used for the unnamed woman at Simon the Leper's house. Same perfume, same quality, same cost. This is not an accident of translation. John wants you to feel the connection. 2 women, same jar, same extravagance, same absolute refusal to do this thing by halves. Mary kneels at his feet. The unnamed woman in Bethany poured over his head. Mary goes lower. She goes to the place she has always gone, and she anoints his feet with the nard, this irreplaceable 3,000-mile perfume. And then She does something that makes the room go very still. She loosens her hair and wipes his feet with it. You have seen this gesture before. The woman in Galilee. The one with no name and the word Hamartolos following her through every door. She did the same thing. Hair unbound, feet anointed. The most private gesture of devotion performed in the most public setting imaginable. Whether Mary knew about the woman in Galilee, we cannot say. What we can say is that the posture is identical. The surrender is identical. Two women, separated by geography and circumstance, and whatever their particular histories cost them, arriving at the same place, in the same position, doing the same thing, at his feet, everything given, nothing held back. John chapter 12, verse 3, says the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Not the room, the house. Every corner, every doorway, the kitchen where Martha is working, the courtyard where perhaps the night air carries it outward still. The whole house fills with the smell of something that cost everything and was given freely and cannot now be taken back. Lazarus breathes it in across the table. Martha smells it from the next room. The fragrance does not ask permission. It simply fills whatever space is available. Then Judas speaks, not the other disciples. Judas, the treasurer, the one who has been managing the group's finances for 3 years, who knows to the denarius what is in the money bag and what is not. His objection is word for word the same as the disciples' objection at Simon the leper's house. Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? The argument is so identical it feels rehearsed, as if this particular protest is the only vocabulary available to people who cannot see what is happening in front of them. John adds one quiet editorial note. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He had the money bag and used to steal from it. Now watch what happens next. Judas will leave this dinner, walk to the chief priests, and offer to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 30. The price of a slave under Mosaic law. He has just watched a woman pour 300 denarii worth of perfume on the feet of the man he is about to sell for 30 coins, and the contrast is not subtle. John does not explain it. He does not need to. He simply places the two facts next to each other and lets you sit with the arithmetic of devotion versus the arithmetic of betrayal. Jesus stops Judas the same way. He stopped the disciples at Simon's table. Leave her alone. Same two words. Same authority. And then he says something that has puzzled readers and scholars and commentators for 20 centuries. Something that opens a door in the text and does not fully close it again. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. Here it is. The question that has been waiting since the first frame of this story. Did she know? And Jesus answers it himself in one sentence, without drama or elaboration, as if it is simply the most obvious thing in the room. She knew. Mary of Bethany, the woman who sat at his feet while everyone else was occupied with more urgent things, the woman who listened when he spoke about his death while the disciples were busy arguing it away. She heard him. She believed him. She believed him so completely, so literally, so without the protective layer of denial that the 12 wrapped around his words every time he said them, that she went and bought burial perfume. She saved it. She waited for the right moment. And when he arrived in Bethany 6 days before the Passover that would end at a cross, she understood that the moment had come. The Mishnah, in the tractate Kelim, teaches that a broken alabaster vessel cannot be repaired or consecrated for sacred use again. Once broken, finished. There is no restoration, no repurposing, no careful preservation of what remains. Mary knew this. She had grown up knowing this, and she broke it anyway. The whole jar, every drop, both hands, nothing saved for later. Because she had understood something about Jesus that even the people closest to him had not yet grasped. He was going to die. And she was not going to let him go to his death without being anointed for it, without someone who loved him doing the one thing love could still do. She could not stop the cross. She could not unmake the betrayal already forming in the mind of the man across the table. She could not hold back the week that was coming like a tide, but she could break her jar. She could give the one irreplaceable thing she owned. She could fill the house with fragrance. And she did. This is where the 4 stories converge. 4 women. 4 jars. 4 rooms filled with the same smell. And when you lay the 4 accounts side by side and let them speak to each other, a single question rises out of all of them. The same question asked 4 different ways, by 4 different women in 4 different moments of their lives. What are you willing to break? The woman in Galilee broke her jar and her pride, and the social contract that said someone like her had no right to be in that room. The unnamed woman in Bethany broke a year's wages without a second thought, in a week when everything felt like it was ending. Mary of Bethany broke the most precious thing she owned as an act of faith in a death she could not prevent and a resurrection she could not yet imagine. 3 things the broken jars leave behind. The first, extravagance is not waste when it is love. The disciples calculated. They were good at calculating. Reasonable men making reasonable arguments about responsible stewardship. Jesus looked past the calculation to the heart underneath it and called what he saw beautiful. What looks like foolishness to the room can look like worship to heaven. The jar that gets called wasteful in the moment is sometimes the one that gets remembered forever. The second, you do not need a name to be seen. The unnamed woman in Mark chapter 14 has no name in any manuscript, any tradition, any record that has survived 2,000 years of careful preservation. But Jesus made her a promise. The whole world will hear what she did. And he kept it. He is still keeping it. Your unseen acts of devotion, the ones nobody photographed or praised or even noticed, are not invisible to him. He is keeping a record that does not work the way our records work. The third. And this is the one that stays with you long after the others have settled. Every one of these women broke something that could not be put back together. That was the point. The jar was not incidental to the gift. The jar was the gift. The breaking was the worship. The irreversibility was the whole message. This is not a loan. This is not an investment with an expected return. This is not a gift I can take back if circumstances change. This is everything, given completely, with both hands. The question these 4 women leave you with is not theological. It is not about which accounts describe the same woman, or what the scholars conclude, or how the timelines align. The question is simpler and harder than any of that. What is your jar? What is the one irreplaceable thing? The thing that cost you something real, the thing you have been carrying under your cloak, the thing you have been telling yourself you will give someday when the moment is right and the risk feels smaller and the room feels safer. And are you willing to walk through the door anyway? Return for a moment to that marketplace. That amber light, that woman moving through a crowd that parts around her not out of respect but out of the deeply human instinct to avoid what makes us uncomfortable. She is carrying something. She knows what it will cost to break it. She has known since morning. She goes anyway. Through the open door, across the silent room, down to the lowest place available. And she does the one thing she came to do. 4 women, 4 broken jars. And a fragrance that, according to Jesus himself, the whole world would never stop smelling.